Welcome to My Matters with Dr. Michelle. Joining me today is Pete Thomas, Season 2 contestant of The Biggest Loser and author of Weight Loss Guide, Lose It Fast, Lose It Forever. Pete spent much of his childhood homeless due to his mother's mental illness. Stay tuned for the conversation. We're going to take a quick break, share your thoughts on Facebook and Instagram at My Matters with Dr. Michelle. Welcome back to My Matters with Dr. Michelle, and welcome, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad. I was so looking forward to this interview.
Awesome.
You know, I've never met anybody in person from the Biggest Loser. So I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so
now,
much.
before we get into The Biggest Loser,
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your background.
Yes, absolutely.
As I looked at your bio, you know, I noticed that you spent a lot of your childhood homeless because of your mother's mental illness.
Absolutely. And so, of course, your show just speaks to me because I grew up with my mother struggling with mental illness. And when I say grew up with her, that's a very subjective term, right? And so I lived in about 13 different cities by the time I was 13 years old because of her mental illness. So we were transient. We lived all over the Midwest and in DC. And it wasn't until later that I realized, okay, we were moving in different places, but there were times we didn't have any place to live. I can specifically remember us taking the Greyhound bus from DC to Norfolk, Virginia, right? And we didn't have a place to stay, and we're sleeping in the Greyhound bus station. And I'm probably 7 or 8 years old, right? So this was the normal way of life for me when I was really young. You mentioned being on The Biggest Loser, of course, and so at my largest I was 416 pounds, but really that started because when we were transient, there not only was I homeless, but there were times where I did not have food. And so as I say, it's like this: let's imagine that you don't have food on a regular basis. How do you eat once food becomes available? Right? You overeat because you don't know when the next meal is coming. And that carries over into adulthood to where, you know, you just constantly overeat because you've never been taught the basics of eating. So my mother really, I've said it like this: my mother taught me how to eat out of boxes, right? How to eat out of a macaroni and cheese box, how to eat out of a cereal box, right? I didn't have any lessons about how to actually eat naturally prepared foods or organic. Of course, this is even before that became a thing, right? But I didn't learn about fruits and vegetables. You know, I was in my 40s before someone said, you know, my mother taught me how to combine a vegetable and a protein with a carb or a starch. I was like, I had never heard that in my life, right? I had never heard that in my life. So my earliest years were really rather traumatic. We made it through, but the roots of that trauma really stuck with me as I became an adult.
And you mentioned like ages like 7 and 8.
That's right.
And I can't really remember specific ages of my childhood. I can tell you, like, I can have memories of events, but not specific ages.
Absolutely.
Were you aware that you were homeless at that age?
That's the point. No, not at all. Because you just think that this is the norm, right? I can remember one particular time my mother told me, she's like, son, we're going on a week-long fast, right? And I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. Now I realize, we were doing that because we did not have any particular food. We would go down to campus there. We would go to the Catholic church. But we weren't going to the church for mass. We were actually going to pick up the church bulletins, because in the church bulletins, there were 2-for-1 Whopper coupons from Burger King. So this was how I was learning to eat. I was learning to eat with fast food. And in that particular location, we did have a house there, but the protective services came and they took me from that location one day while my mom was gone. In that particular house, we did not have heat in the house, and we had just a bed. So there was a mattress on the floor and a box spring against the window, because my mom believed that there was actually rays that were shooting into the house, right? So she just this real struggle with mental illness. So not only did we struggle with food, but when we were homeless, as I mentioned, I just thought that was the norm. I had nothing to compare it to.
Was your mom, do you know if she was diagnosed with bipolar, schizophrenia?
Yeah. So she later in life, once she was taken in by protective services, and that she lived in an adult foster care facility for the majority of my adult life, and she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoia. So she took a couple of strong medications, Cogitin and these other really strong medications. But yeah, she struggled mightily, and the roots of that that, I was to learn later in life from other relatives that the root of that was a violent blow to the head, right? She was violently beaten when she was very young. Well, I shouldn't say very, when she was around 18 or 19 years old. She was doing undercover work, right? Undercover police work, which was a program through Michigan State College where people would come in and they would take kids and have those kids go into communities and buy drugs. Well, she was discovered, right, beaten really severely and left on the doorstep of the hospital. This is what the family learned and shared with me.
So at that time, just to be clear, was she a college student?
She was a college student.
She was a college student.
That's right. Okay. She was in the latter part of her college years at Michigan State College. It was called Michigan State College at the time, right? And so beaten really badly, left on the doorstep of a college, and that started this or caused this mental imbalance in her brain that carried forth. I was born about 10 years after that, but the roots of our struggle was already cemented in with that issue.
And it's interesting. It sounds like your mom found really creative ways to mask what was really happening. Yeah. Like for her to say, "We're going to fast for a week." Right. I mean, she could have just said there's no food
That's right.
and
Absolutely.
Not had any second thoughts about it, considering what she was going through.
And it's interesting because there's a principle, like in the middle of difficulties, right, resilience can be built. So one of the other things, not only did she mask that, very good observation there, the other thing is when we were living in that one location I talked about, right, I wasn't going to school regularly, but my mother would bring home books for me to read, right? And so I can remember being there and watching this television show, because I could only watch like about an hour a day, right, in the evening, and I was watching Who Shot JR at night, right? But during the day, I would read books about medical books and learning about X and Y chromosomes and all that. So there were some things in there that really lasted for a while. Not just the bad things, but good things as well.
Well, can you believe it? We got to go to break already. Awesome. We're going to take a quick break, head over to My Matters with Dr. Michelle. Be right back.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-797-0574. That's 800-797-0574. Again, 800-797-0574.
When depression meets hope, everything can change. Give someone who's struggling the help they desperately need. Your support of the National Alliance on Mental Illness funds programs and support groups that can transform a life. Be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
Welcome back to My Matters with Dr. Michelle. So, Pete, I asked you about your relationship with your mom. Your mom passed 4 years ago, and you never had a relationship with her even before
That's right.
passing.
Yeah, I didn't, because as an adult, she was in an adult foster care facility and just struggled, with her mental condition. And she was always on some form of medication. The interesting thing was that through the years we became separated. I was in and out of foster homes like quite a bit, and after she passed, I was able to petition the state of Michigan for like my adoption records, and because I was adopted by third cousins at one point later in life, right?
Okay.
So I petitioned the state of Michigan to get these records, you know, from social services and all that, and I discover even more about myself. Like the first time that I was taken into protective services, the records say that I and my little sister were out playing, and we were out playing outside our home, and we didn't have any clothes on, right? Now, I don't remember the exact age, but I was just old enough to learn how to tie my shoe. Right, and so around 4, 5, 6 years old, and this was one of those times where my mom left us, like she just left us by herself to fend for ourselves. And so there were these series of times where I was in and out of foster care, then reading through the records, it was also interesting to see how she was intentional about discovering where I was. In one particular time, I'm living on St. Albans Street on the east side of Detroit, and she comes to the school where I'm at, right, and waves me over, and literally abducts me from foster care, right? And I'm just like, hey, it's my mom, of course I'm going to go.
You're running up to her,
That's
I
right,
know
that's
you.
right,
Yeah.
exactly right. But here's the struggle with the mental illness versus the side that's cogent and coherent, right? She comes and scoops me up, right? We hop into a cab, a waiting cab. We go to the airport. I'm in DC that evening. So she had planned all of this out, right? And when we're in DC, we have no place to stay. We've got no place to live, right? And so the mental struggle, the side that struggles mentally, combining with the lucid side, just made for some, you know, some crazy and unusual times growing up. So from that point in time where she abducted me, I never was able to reunite with my sister. And the interesting thing about that was I even questioned, well, why would you take me and not take my sister? But reading through the records, it was always her intention to go back and get my sister, right? She would even call the foster home and berate the foster parents, say, I'm coming to get my daughter. But really what it looked like from the records is that she was never mentally able to go back and to get her and reunite us. And to be honest, it may have been for the better, because I lived a very, you know, as I mentioned, very transient life. We were never settled. And so I remember hearing from her relatives or somebody that my sister ended up being adopted, but yeah, never was able to reunite with my sister.
And so fast forward to, you mentioned 416 pounds.
Yes.
At what point did the weight start packing on for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in actuality, it would have probably always been knocking at the door. But when you're young, right, you can keep a certain amount of weight.
It's acceptable.
Well,
somewhat.
It is acceptable now. Back then, really, we just as kids just ran around. Right? So you would go outside, you'd run around, you'd play and do all of that kind of stuff. The interesting thing is, because I was transient, never played any organized sports, even at 6'5", right? And so, but when I got to college is when the weight really came on. So I go to school and I'm up at University of Michigan, and for breakfast, it's like, wow, all of this bacon, they just got it laid out here, you know, dormitory food, right? I'm like, this is amazing. But then as I transitioned even out of college, right, those eating habits, when you carry them over into regular everyday life, that's where the pounds really start to come on. Even though the habits that would lead to that excess weight gain, they were baked in from an early age, right? Because again, as I mentioned, food's not there. When it is there, I'm going to eat more and more and more. When that catches up with you over time, and it's really the trauma from the childhood that's cemented in childhood, right, that actually causes the weight to come on later in life.
Exactly, because you find ways to heal and comfort yourself.
That's
and that's
right.
why we call it comfort food,
That's
right?
right,
But then
absolutely.
everything becomes a comfort food. You're
That's
just
right,
looking for
that's right.
something. This
Absolutely.
is something I can control.
That's right.
I
And
can eat as
absolutely.
much as I want, and I'm
That's
going to feel better.
And you've got it exactly right. When your life is out of control, right, and you get to a point to where you're looking to control something. Okay, here's what I can control. I will never, ever, 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 ever be without food again. Right, but then we take it to extremes, right? And these things happen. I can remember, like, my normal lunch would be four pieces of fried chicken and a biscuit from KFC.
And At that weight, were you able to move around? Were you able to
gosh.
carry around 416 pounds?
Well, the interesting thing is you are, because it comes on slowly, right? So there's some strength under there, right? And so I can remember going on The Biggest Loser, and I'm on the show, and we're all huge, right? And so, but the one thing I would do is I'd look down at my calves, and my calves are better than yours, right? You know what I mean? I'm
So you
looking
were
for
judging.
something. I'm looking for something, right? My calves are better. Well, of course, your calves, you've been carrying around 400 pounds of weight. Of course, your calves should look good, right? But yeah,
I never thought about it that
that's
way.
right. They should look good. So you can carry that. Now, here's the thing, as I say, all of the different, comorbidities, they're constantly knocking at the door. I was diabetic, right? But didn't take medicine for it, right? High blood pressure, all these things. I was borderline everything. And the amazing thing about The Biggest Loser was that it shows you what your body was capable of. My blood pressure went from 150 over 90, right, to 102 over 60. My resting heart rate goes from 93 beats a minute from 83 beats a minute to 62. And that all happens in 14 days. In 14 days, the amazing transformation was on, and it just continued from there.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about, who said, hey, let's get you on The Biggest Loser.
Yes,
and what was it like working with the stars of The Biggest Loser,
Absolutely.
Jillian Michaels? And
Yes.
head over to @MyMatters with Dr. Michelle. Be right back.
You've decided to go back to school. Good for you. Which would you rather do? Get up early, get dressed, drive to college, find a parking spot, walk across campus, only to sit in a giant lecture hall, or earn your degree from home with Independence University. We'll even provide you with a new laptop and tablet to keep when you graduate, and a personal student success team. Independence University. Online, but never alone.
1-800-840-6317. That's 1-800-840-6317.
Here's an important message from the Diabetes Solution Center. Diabetics understand all too well the pain of pricking your fingers, but now by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor or CGM, you can immediately reduce your pain. It's easy to use and helps you make more accurate diabetes treatment decisions. If you are testing your blood sugar 4 or more times daily, injecting insulin 3 or more times daily, or using an insulin pump, call the Diabetes Solution Center right now.
Hi, I'm Jimmy J.J. Walker. If you're on Medicare, listen to this. I called the 1-800 number to see what extra Medicare benefits I could get. An actual person answered, looked up my zip code, and boom, I was offered extra benefits like dental coverage, including dentures, extractions, fillings, plus prescriptions, transportation, meals, and so much more, all at no additional cost. And then I asked about the benefit that adds money to my Social Security check. And get this, I'm entitled to an extra $100 a month. That's $1,200 a year added to my Social Security check. And I was like, dynamite! Call the 1-800 number on the screen and see what you may be entitled to. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-519-1087. That's 1-800-519-1087 now.
Welcome back to My Matters with Dr. Michelle. So Pete, and you talked about being an entrepreneur. So you have a career in IT.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I've done different things over the years. Done things, traveled, and been a professional speaker. Currently, I am CEO of a software company in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So yeah, IT has been in my blood a little bit over the years. It sure has.
And that prepared you for what you're doing now, as far as like you got to The Biggest Loser. So whose idea? Who said like, hey, we need to go on this Biggest Loser?
Well, it's so interesting. The show first aired in 2004, right? And I'm sitting at home, right? I'm dipping some Pringles in some chocolate ice cream, right? Because I'm big as a house, right? And I'm working on my big sexy figure, right? Regularly, right? So I'm dipping chips in the ice cream while eating it, and I'm watching TV. I'm like, who goes on a reality TV show? Real people don't go on a reality TV show. That can't be real, right? sure enough, it is real. And at some point they said that they were looking for a contestant. So I decided to apply, right? Went through the interview process, sent materials in, got a call back from the producers, drove down to Indianapolis and actually interviewed for the show. And they called me to be on. I was an alternate because they bring a whole bunch of contestants out to California. And really what they're looking for, you have to understand, television shows, so they're looking for people who are outgoing and all of that type of stuff, right? So I was an alternate. The Lord opened the door. I ended up making it on the show, and it was life-changing. In literally in 62 days, I lost 83 pounds. And then I lost
83 pounds?
83 pounds in 62 days, and then lost another 102 pounds at home because I was voted off of the show. Go back to the show after having lost the 185 pounds total, and end up winning what's called the at-home prize for the contestants that got voted off. So it was a good day, won 100 grand, right? And really what was really important was it started me on the journey, right? So it was just simply a jump start. It was really a jump start. And I went home and I started studying, right, the psychology of success. And so I started studying, you know, exercise science and nutritional science, right? I took myself as the case study, right? And I was going to be successful because I wasn't going to let this opportunity to change my life slip away. And so that meant a lot of study, a lot of research. There's something called a pub crawler, and it will go out and pull in research studies or abstracts about, you know, things that happen in a particular industry. So I had this pub crawler every single week, dropping 100 studies into my email box every single week, and related to weight loss, related to weight maintenance, because I was just committed to keeping it off and been able to do so.
And it sounds like you knew that it wasn't just about dropping the weight, it was about changing your mindset.
Correct.
Also.
Absolutely
Because
right.
it had
Absolutely.
to come from within, and that's the only
right.
way. You know, I say improve your mental health, improve your life, and
That's
so it really is all about that.
Absolutely.
And when I look at this show, I'm like, wow, they're torturing.
Yes.
They're torturing these
Yes.
contestants.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm a fan of Jillian Michaels just because I worked. I use her workout. I was using like her workouts. You know, I still do. And she's tough.
She
and
is.
so I couldn't imagine working out with her in person
Yes.
though, because I can stop whenever I want to stop at home.
That's right. That's right.
So what was it like for you being there and going through all of this?
About 10 times worse than what you could imagine.
Okay. I'm glad
really
you're honest
tough.
about it.
I mean, so, and now here's the thing, Jillian was a savant, right? She was just a genius when it came to weight loss, and she's from LA, and so she was a physical therapist and a weight loss professional before she ever went on the show. So she knew how to get our bodies and minds how to get our bodies to move. But here's the thing, the mental side of it was even better. One of the things that she would do is she would sit down at dinner table just like this, and she would really get to know you, and you'd come to an understanding about who you were and why you were there, right? And so if you said, well, I've got 2 kids at home. Now, it wasn't me, I don't have any kids, but I remember her talking to contestant and saying that. And then you go into the gym. If you slack off in the gym, she's going to use what she learned to come back on you and to challenge you. She said, okay, if you don't want to work out, just get off the treadmill and go home and die on your 2 kids. And you're like, oh my God, did she just say that? And it really brings reality.
So that was real.
That was real.
Okay.
She really brings reality to your face. You have an opportunity that people from around the country, 250,000 people a year apply for. Are you going to waste this? And if you do, that's going to impact the next generation. It's going to impact your family. So she would challenge you mentally. And I had an opportunity to write a book a few years ago, and I broke it down into 3 things, right? I said, number 1, master your mind. Right there, as you mentioned, like there's all these different ways to do that, but you have to master your mind. And then from there, you have to manage your mouth. And then from there, you have to multiply the muscles. So you're right, the mental side of it was key. It's number 1. About 2018, I'm working with a client out in Chelsea, and the company sits on a well. The water source is a well. I'm drinking a gallon of water a day, and I'm used to drinking a gallon of water from the tap because I'm from Detroit, right? And it sits on an aquifer. It's clean water here. Well, in Chelsea, this water was sitting on the well. Come to find out, the water was contaminated, and I'd been drinking it for 6 months. So bacteria develops. I end up going into hospital. The actual bacteria attacks the lining of my heart. I end up in the hospital for a week, and that caused a series of health challenges, right? And so weight gain came with that. But the thing that has kept me, because I'm on the backside of it now after 3 years, right? The thing that has kept me are these principles. Okay, let me first of all master my mind. So when I couldn't breathe and couldn't work out, I'd still pack up my gym bag and go to the gym. And many times I just sit in the parking lot in the car. I'm like, okay, this too will pass. This too will pass. Lord, you're going to get me through this as well. But you're absolutely right. Those principles, once you submit those principles in, they just don't leave.
And so once you lost weight, people looked at you and said, you know, wow, look at you.
That's right.
They were probably saying you look great. People always comment on
absolutely.
weight.
That's right.
How did you feel?
So here's the thing, 90% of people who lose weight regain it within 3 to 5 years, right? And the reason being is because the last thing to lose weight is that mind, right? I used to say my inner fatty is just trying to come out, right? It just wants to break out. It just wants to break out. It really took me about 3 to 5 years to really transform my mind fully. I remember as soon as I lost the weight, I went shopping for clothes. I won the show in November. I go to Chicago in December to an area of town where clothes, big size clothes were, right? The year prior, I had bought a great wool jacket, okay? Size 60 extra long. This year I go there and I'm struggling to buy the size that fits me. Right, I actually buy some pants in the size 40. I wore 36, but I said to myself, well, I'm going to buy this in case I pick up a little weight, right? And never did until I got, sick a couple of years ago. Never did. So what had to happen was my mind had to be transformed, and that took a few years. It took 3 to 5 years. And I set goals. I set a couple of great goals along the way to help me to do that. But you're absolutely right. That mind was the key.
Yeah, that's the key.
It is.
Well, Pete, if somebody wants to learn more about your story, how can they find you?
Facebook.com/Pete Thomas is Twitter.com/Pete Thomas as well.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Over 40 million people in the U.S. will experience a mental health condition this year. That's 1 in 5 of us. Many suffer in silence. They're your friends, neighbors, and loved ones. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, provides life-changing support and education so that no one walks the path of mental illness alone. Show you care. Walk with us for mental health. To walk, sponsor, or volunteer, visit NAMIWalks.org.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing. Call 800-662-3980. 800-662-3980. 800-662-3980. Again, 800-662-3980.
Here's an important message from the Diabetes Solution Center. Diabetics understand all too well the pain of pricking your fingers, but now by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor or CGM, you can immediately reduce your pain. It's easy to use and helps you make more accurate diabetes treatment decisions. If you are testing your blood sugar 4 or more times daily, injecting insulin 3 or more times daily, or using an insulin pump, call the Diabetes Solution Center right now.
Thank you for tuning in today. Do you have days when you feel unmotivated, like nothing is working? Instead of trying harder, take a step back and try again tomorrow. Head over to @Mind with Dr. Michelle. Share your thoughts about today's episode and more. Improve your mental health, improve your life. See you next week.